Hello everyone. So a few days ago, I went on TinyURL to create a bit shorter URL than I had it for one of my scenarios, and I figure out that the TinyURL has quite remarkable set of features that previously didn't exist. Well, previously when I really wanted to use their services last time. So you even have like plans, certain features you can register, etc. You have a lot of billings there with quite a significant amount of features. And what I was curious about was the value of the tiny URL. So I went there and I say tiny URL value, and I figure out that the tiny URL apparently should worth around $46 million. So the question is, if the tiny URL worth $46 million, and this is just assumption here, obviously in the article, then the question would be how much time should we need to create a platform which could do exactly what TinyURL is doing, which is essentially shortening the URLs. So from one big URL, we will create something smaller and something easier to use for our customers, or maybe for our SMS marketing, or something where the size of the URL is really crucial. So I decided to create a small startup run, and essentially to show you how do I create the apps, and how you should actually do the development of your platform. So as you already know, we already have the project, the MVC project that we created previously to build, to test our build and release pipelines, to test our deployment to the Azure. And I think this is quite a good base to start coding and to start building our own tiny URL lookalike platform. So to do this, I can identify already a couple of parts of the application that are quite important. One is the web application, the other one would be obviously some sort of a business layer of the application, and the third one would be the data layer of the application. So the database itself would sit at the end of the way. So as you may see, the application that we have here, so this is just a template app, it doesn't have anything. This works as expected, so we just have the welcome screen, and this is more or less it. So what I want is the web application itself should be as simple as possible. It should have just like one input field here, it will have a one button here, and that would be it. We will have no privacy or anything like this. We just care about the basic functionality of the application that is used by TinyURL or any other URL shorteners. So first thing that we need to think of is how to essentially develop the application. So my approach here is going to be a bit opposite than the one that is usually being done especially junior developers are doing it. But now I'm thinking maybe we can actually a bit mix. So I'm usually doing first the backend, the business logic, the tests around it, but we can mix maybe today a bit, just so that I can show you how certain functionalities could look like, and how you could better structure your code when you're going without thinking on the UI at the first place. So let me just quickly stop the project, and I guess you're already quite familiar with the MVC projects. So we have a controllers. In this case, we have a home controller, and home controller has already a certain injection of the logger for the home controller, has few actions like index, privacy, and error in this case. And from the views, he has a home where we have index and privacy. We have a shared one, and shared one has the basic layout. So what I want to do here first, I'm just going to go to the index quickly, and now here I'm going to have like a small update of this welcome and learn about. So here we will just have like a small small input. We will use a razor to do this. And I said I'm going to do it quickly as a junior developer, and then maybe let's evolve to something better as we're building the solution. So our purpose is going to be to essentially save this data in a plain file, right? It's going to be something, some JSON structure of the file that we will utilize, and essentially that will be it, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a new folder here, which is going to be called view models. And here I'm just going to add a new class, which is going to be called home, let's say home view model, something really basic. And I'm just going to have here string, and the string is going to be called URL to short, and it will have a getter and setter. Okay, and now when I have this, I will actually include this in my home page here, and I'm going to say that a model is of type home view model. And now what I can do with a razor is I can say something like HTML that begin form text box 4, and let me just say URL to short. Quite simple. I'm going to delete this paragraph here because I don't need it, and the only thing that I will need in addition is a button, and the text is going to be run. Just simple. Let me just put this in a div quickly. Let me put this one, I should actually do cut. I made a mess. Okay, and let's just clean this up one. Okay, nice. And let's just put one more div here below the button so that we have those nice blocks. So essentially this would give us basic functionality to show the URL and to run the button. The type of the button is going to be submit, because everything here we're going to just put in a form. So sorry for quite bad typing. I'm just nervous always when I'm trying to record something. So method of the form is going to be a post. So essentially what we're going to do is when we click the button run, we're going to post the value here, which is URL to short, to our backend. And now I'm going to go to my controller, to the home controller, and here I'm going to say that in a public action result index, here I will expect to have home view model, and I'm just going to say this is a view model, and this is going to be of a type post, HTTP post. So we're going to post the data here. And let me just quickly say return view, something like this. I just want to see it work. I'm going to have a breakpoint here, and I'm going to press play to see the application running. So just ignore the UI, we don't care about it at the moment. So I will just write here test and click run. Let's see, something is happening, and I have my breakpoint hit here, and I see the value of the URL to short. And this is great. So essentially what we can do right now, we can assume that this is a valid test, and we can that this is a valid value, and we can shorten it up. So how do we do this? So first thing, we would need some sort of algorithm which is going to randomize some string to the values that we didn't have before. Same thing as 10URL is doing. So he's maybe you have the opportunity to essentially write your alias here, but I guess I'm pretty sure that you can actually he can do this for you. But doesn't matter. So as a good junior developer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add a new project here, which is going to contain my business logic. So I'm just going to create a new project, and I'm going to use some really creative name for my class library. And I'm going to name it business. Great. And I'm going to use .NET 5 because .NET 6 is still in preview. Let's go on create. And now we're getting our super fancy business project. So I'm just going to rename this class right now to something which is called randomizer. The studio asks us nicely, do you want to change the name of this one? And I say yes. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make this a static class because it's going to calculate something quite simple for me. I'm just going to make it like this, and I'm going to make here public static string, and I'm going to say generate random string. And here I'm going to have something which is length, and the default value will be something like, let's say 5 characters. That should be quite okay. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to also specify what kind of types of characters do I want to use, because URL is not going to handle, and it's not going to work quite nicely with some of the characters that could, I don't know, break the query string or do something, some magic there. So I'm just going to write here something like string characters, and I'm going to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, K, whatever, H, I, K, L, it doesn't matter, that's enough. And I'm just going to say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is more than enough. And now the next step would be to essentially to create a random and to build a random character from all this text that of those text characters that are used in our character string. So how do I do this? So first thing, I'm just going to say I'm going to build an array of characters, which is going to be, let's say, string char, and I'm going to say this is a new this and of size of a length. Now for each of those guys, I'm just going to use a for loop here. Just 1 second. Is less than string char length, and we're going to just increase it in every single iteration. Oops, I'm just doing a bit E. I'm really nervous. This is actually quite bad. Okay, good. Now I have my loop, and my loop is going to iterate through something for n amount of time. So essentially, where the default length is 5, so I would say in the case that it has 5, it will run essentially 5 times. So what I'm going to do here, I will actually need also one thing here, and this is a random. So I'm going to say random equals new random. So this is a random class from the .NET, and essentially what I'm going to say is string chars from I is going to be characters. So this guy here, I cannot see because I made it like this. So characters would be from my random. I'm going to go with the next, and I'm going to say characters.length. So like this, I'm going to build my characters, and essentially next step would be var final would be new string of string characters, and I would say return final. Okay, so essentially this would hopefully this would return my random string. So I have to essentially test this. So how do I test this? Oops. So how do I test this? I will add a new project, which is going to be a test. And I'm going to also use a class project for this. Or maybe I already have like some, great, unit test project, perfect. Click next, and unit tests, let's just go like this, .NET 5, that's fine. And great, we are getting already some of the attributes here. We're getting our test method, and here I'm just going to rename this and call it randomizer tests. Great. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say randomizer should generate random string. Okay, quite well simple. And now what I'm going to say is randomizer, so var random string is randomizer. Actually I need to add a reference here, just 1 second. So to my business, and randomizer is here, that generate random string of, let's say, 5 characters. Well, let's go with 6 because it's 5 here. Great. So now what I want to test is, is assert assert, oh come on, equal, I didn't use it like this for some time, random string that length should be of I think 6 at the end, if we set here. Okay, and assert, what do we have here additionally? That we have is not null. Is not null, so it should be, well, actually this covers it already from above. I don't know, why do I do this? I guess really nervous. Okay, good. Let's just debug this test. I want to see how does it work. I'm just going to go here and I'm building my random. I'm going through the loop. Looks good so far. And let me see a final. Okay, looks nice. KK. Nice. And let's see. Okay, our tests has successfully passed. But what is our problem here? We actually don't do a check if we have 0 records. So let's just say void randomizer should throw the exception when a string with 0 is selected, something like this. And we're going to essentially use something like this. We're going to mark that this is a test method, and what I'm going to say here, that expected exception is type of exception, just generic exception. My God. Exception. Okay. And let me just see, is this going to happen if I have 0 characters? So let's just run. No, because say here, test method did not throw the exception, because what actually happened is we went to the randomizer here and he didn't went to this loop. He essentially built a new string of those characters. So essentially we didn't get almost any result. So what we have to do here is say if a length is 0, then we will say throw new exception, and we're going to just say cannot generate empty random strings. So the question is, should we actually do this? Should we use maybe, you know, if it's 0, then return 5 or something like this? But, you know, just for the sake of simplicity and to understand, to give the understanding to our callers, we will just throw the exception. So let's now run all of our tests. Let's see. Perfect. We have our tests green, as you may see here, and I can see it on the other screen as well. So all green. Great. Now we already have our 3 projects, and what do we need here is we will need to add a reference from our business project to our test MVC project. So business project, click, and we will have a reference in our MVC web project. So now what I'm going to do is essentially in this HTTP post operation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomize the string that we have received here. I'm just going to hide it behind a certain keys that we're going to generate using our business logic randomizer. And then I'm going to save it inside the file. So as a good junior developer, I'm going to obviously do everything right here because it is quite straightforward process. So one thing that I could do is I could also create a certain class. And I'm going to have here, well, actually I have models here already, so let me just reuse this one. And I'm going to call this one URL mapper. And my class is going to consist of two properties. One is going to be, key, and the other one would be URL. Get set. Wow. Okay. Let me also just build a constructor of this one, URL mapper. And I'm going to say here string key, string URL, and I'm just going to say key is key and URL is URL, so that I just have to provide those values. So now in my index here, the first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var key would be randomizer generate random string. 5 characters is enough. I have already default values, so I don't care about this. And the other value I already have. So my model to create in a file is going to be a new URL mapper value. So I'm going to say var to save equals new URL mapper. And I'm going to say for key and for this view model that URL to short, I will have the value to save. So I can actually map URLs some nicer way, nicer variable name. So I can already save those values inside my database. And we already said this is going to be a file database for now. And I should save the data as a JSON file. So the whole structure of the JSON is then it would be nice if we would have array of those URL mappers. So essentially what I'm going to say is I'm just going to say something like I'm going to expect then a list of the URL mappers, and then I'm going to essentially append this one to the list. So first I'm going to say here private const string, and I'm going to say file path is going to be something like let's say C file db, and I'm going to name this one as URL short .json, something like this. Simple. Okay, I'm going to create this file previously, so before running the app. Okay, so what I'm going to do now here, I'm just going to say all mapped URLs should be something like file read. Oops, file. Do I have a file here? Oh, yeah, I'm missing reference. Oopsie. Wow. Var all mapped file. I'm doing some weird things now. Just 1 second. System.io.file. Okay. And I'm going to say read all text. And the path is going to be file path that we provided above. Great. So now I can even do something even better, something like, actually, let's just call this existing data, and let's say var mapped URLs is going to be something. We're just going to now deserialize the object that has been serialized in JSON. So we're going to say JSON convert, JSON convert. Do I have a Newtons of JSON here? This is interesting. Let's see. No. Great. Let's just get the Newtons of JSON. This is going to help us a lot. Okay, should be there. JSON convert. Great. And I'm going to say here deserialize object, which is going to be of a type of list of URL mappers, and I'm going to say existing data. So now I'm going to have all my mapped URLs, and I'm going to say something like if mapped URLs is null, I'm just going to say mapped URLs is new list of this guys, and here I'm just going to say mapped URLs dot add and map URL. So I'm just going to add this one. And my last thing to be would be to essentially save this value to the path. So essentially I have to serialize again this one. So I'm just going to say var serialized data would be JSON convert that serialize object, and I'm going to pass mapped URL. So now they're going to be back again texts, and here what I would do, the last thing would be now to say file, let's just add a reference so that we can and I would say write all text, and the path would be again file path, and the content would be serialized data. So let me just quickly go ahead and create this on my machine. So I say file db, and here let me even create a file, although I think this one will create it. URL short, and let's just name it JSON. So at the moment it has like a 0 byte size, but after we run this code, essentially it would need to have a bit of a value here. So let's just run our platform and let's see, is it working as expected? Okay, and let's just use a test as a value, and we have our breakpoint being hit. We're getting our final. Oopsie, I didn't want to do this, but let's just see mapped URLs. Okay, we have something. We serialize the data, and we're going to do a save. So let me just quickly see. Okay, this is now this now has a value. So actually, let me just go it with Notepad++, and here I see that really we created a value here. So what we actually need now is we would need a bit of a same code to essentially read this value here, and we would read this value using our get method. So our get method would essentially tell us, hey, you know what, we have created for you the short URL, and this short URL, you can access it from this and this link, and that's essentially it. So let's just enrich our view model a bit. So let's just say here that we have public string short URL. I'm just going to say get set, something like this, and we can actually return the view model to our view. And here I can say view model. I'm going to say shorten URL would be something like, let me just put the key itself. I'm just going to assign the key value, and that I believe should be, I would say, quite okay. Actually, what we can do here, I think we can say let me just see, request get display URL. This is actually what I want, and I'm just going to actually add here like a small like a query string, like something like this. This would actually be good. And then here, what is this doing? So essentially, I'm building the shorted URL that we're going to pass to our web, to our HTML. Essentially, I'm going to say, hey, this is going to be the URL which we're currently using for this page, plus in the query string, I'm going to say u equals certain key. Meaning that here in our get method, we should say something like string u is something. And we are going to be able essentially to utilize this value to redirect a certain user to the action. But let me just first see, is this working as expected? It should. So let me just say here something. I'm just going to add a new div here, and maybe if model that shorted URL not equal string, maybe it's better to actually do something like string is null or empty, and then like this. If it's not, then we're going to just say here, let's add a span, and let's say you can access your link via, and then we're going to say model that shorted URL. So that is essentially, that's the whole magic. So let's just play this one, and let's see, is it working as expected? Okay, we have a null exception because our model is null, so we cannot even access this value from our get. The reason for this is we actually haven't pushed our view model to our view from the controller. So let us just fix this. So I'm just going to create var view model equals new, what was the name? Home view model. Great. So now this home view model is going to be passed to the view, and we will initialize the home view model. Therefore, Razor itself will be able to work with it. So great, we have our page, and now I'm just going to go say new test, more creative. Let's click run. Hopefully we're going to be able to get our value, and we got it. We got it. This is our URL. We can confirm this if we just refresh it, and it seems quite okay, seems same, which is pretty good so far. So as a junior developer, I'm doing my very amazing job. So what's next? So essentially the whole point is, if I get the value for u, which is a key, then I should redirect the person to the correct page. So how do I do this? So what I can do here, I can reuse some of the code that we had here, and as a really good junior developer, I'm going to do this by copy pasting the code. So the first thing would be saying if you, let's go again, if string is null or empty, but something like this. If it's not null or empty, what we're going to do, we're going to say, let's just read all text, something like this, good junior developer. And now I'm going to say mapped is this. And now I'm going to say var URL to mapped URL would be mapped URLs. Let's go single or default, and let's say key equals u. And now if mapped URL is not null, I'm going to say redirect to mapped URL that URL. That's it. that is essentially it. And what is this? Possible null. Okay. Yeah. This is but let's not think about it. Okay. Now let me just go ahead and let me run the application. Let's see, what do I have? So now I'm just going to say here www.youtube.com, and I'm going to click run, and it tells me, hey, I can access my link via using this one. So great. I'm going to add a breakpoint here, and I'm going to just paste it in a new tab, enter, and let's see. I'm hitting my breakpoint, and now I'm going here, existing data. I have all the whole file of existing data. Mapped URL is deserialized successfully, very nice. Mapped URL found one, and then I'm going to redirect. Let me just play, and let's see. This actually didn't really work. Okay, I know why. So let's say response redirect to this. Let's see now, is it going to be any better? Hopefully my link is still working. It's already there, but it is null, which is okay because now it just goes to the view model. Great. So let me just reuse the old one. Let me just play it. And he actually wanted to go to this one. Okay, the reason for this is because we're actually missing something, and this is a bit of a convention. So if I say something like https www.youtube.com, and I run this one, and I can access it here. Let me just see, is this going to be any better? Paste it, F5, we are on the YouTube. That's it. Perfect. I'm really happy as a junior developer how I successfully built the tiny URL. Let me see, in around 40 minutes with a complete explanation for all the details. Now, the problem is we have here certain dependencies. We have a first dependency to a file. We have, obviously, it's not going to be quite feasible to read the complete value of the file every time when we do something, because when the file becomes really big, it's going to be a bit of a problematic for us to manage all those values. Now, what we should do, we should essentially think about how to be able to switch from a file as a data source to something more feasible for the future. And we can say, okay, this can be something like an SQL database, which would make sense. It could be something, it could be whatever, but we really don't want we don't want to spend too much time thinking about this. So our implementation should be as abstract as possible. Then the next thing is those methods here and those this code here could be a bit difficult to maintain, because if we just quickly go here again back to the tiny URL, now tiny URL has certain features. It can switch to the different links. It has a plans, it has certain features, additional ones, what do you want, whatever you want to do. And essentially our code could be quite difficult to maintain from this structure. Now, if we want to make this working better, if we want to make it work stable, we will have to refactor our code, and our code should be backed by the tests. This means if some of the logic here changes, our implementation shouldn't really break. So the next part of our session is going to be refactoring the code, which is essentially working right now, making it a bit more flexible to, let's say, switch the data source from the file as a data source to the SQL Server database as a source. And then afterwards, we're going to build our really, I would say, at least decent test collection and automate deployment of our, let's call it Shortify or something like this. and we're going to deploy it to the Azure. But we're not just going to deploy it as Azure as we were before. Essentially, what I want to also do as a part of this startup project is I want to automate the creation of the infrastructure. So we will not just refactor code, we'll build a complete automation of the infrastructure and a code itself. So this is going to be our next stage. So thank you very much, and see you in the next episode.